The question of the crisis and the project of challenging the crisis. Greece, as you know, is kind of the poster country for the crisis in Europe. And I'm here in Athens now. I've been here for about almost 2 months. And following on work I did in Ecuador, I was invited to come here and see if I could contribute to how a cooperative and social economy paradigm or model might be used by the progressive movements here in Greece as a response to the challenge and the austerity programs that are being implemented here because of the crisis. So I just wanted to make that point because I feel very strongly that the cooperative and the social economy are key for actually conceptualizing, thinking about what are some of the pathways to deal with the crisis, and beyond that, what are the kinds of models that may be used to try and conceive of a political economy that is a completely different paradigm than the neoliberal economic system that's in play today in Greece and across Europe. The subject of the presentation, Humanizing the Economy, is drawn from the book that I published in 2010. Today, there are about 1 billion members of cooperatives across 145 countries internationally. And so it is by far and away the largest, I want to say the largest grassroots movement in the world. And employs a huge number of people, matching in by some figures the employee figures of the largest multinational corporations. So it's very extensive and it's a very large and a very substantial economic movement globally. This is just figures on a ranking of the top cooperative economies in the world, and you can see they're beginning with New Zealand on the top, going down through France, Switzerland, and on to number 10 in Norway. So most of these co-op economies, as you'll notice, are in fact in Europe, and in particular in Northern Europe, with the exception of New Zealand. The other countries are very strongly in the center of Western industrialized economies globally. And of course, this is where the cooperative movement, the modern cooperative movement, took its impetus in the latter part of the 1700s and mid-1800s. It's also interesting to note that 2/3 of the countries that are listed in the top 10 cooperative economies also make up 8 of the top 12 spots in the Social Progress Index. And this is an international index that measures, applies a number of factors to determine the overall social progress of a country. And when we talk about humanizing the economy, and I'll make this point later, that cooperatives and social economy, strong social economies, have a very strong correlation with high levels of social capital, social cohesion, and social progress. And these figures, as you can see here, bear this out. These are the social progress economies, the top social progress economies, and you can see most of them are in the top 10 of the top co-op economies as well. Now, what's interesting is that the globalization of capital today and of international distribution, supply, and the financial system replicates the rise of capital in the Industrial Revolution during the 1800s. And what is fascinating to see is that just as in the 1800s in England, traditional forms of work, of small-scale production, village-based production, and the operation of markets within a clear social framework are being disrupted. They're being dislocated, and economic power is now again being centralized in the hands of large, unaccountable corporations on a global scale, replicating the same process that was underway in the UK when the rise of cooperatives first began in the 1800s at the dawn the Industrial Revolution. And this has generated, in fact, the same kind of responses. So you have in all these developing countries, whether we're talking about Mexico, we're talking about Africa or East Asia, a very similar kind of response to try and rehumanize and recapture popular and social control over economics and markets through the creation of cooperatives, just as was the case in the 1800s in the UK. Co-ops are still re-emerging as a social defense against the catastrophic effects of uncontrolled capital in the free market system, made all the more worse with the austerity policies now being imposed throughout Europe and the PIGS countries in particular, as was mentioned at the beginning. So there's a key relationship and linkage between co-ops and globalization. And when we talk about cooperatives as a means of humanizing the economy, this is in part what we need. That co-ops can be a key means of protecting local economies. For example, the rise of the fair trade movement, local economic diversification, the creation of distribution, supply, and training and exchange networks among small suppliers in regions, connecting to fair trade systems internationally is one way that cooperatives are playing a major role in renewing and strengthening local economies. The fair trade movement, in fact, is founded on local producer cooperatives that use the fair trade system through cooperative networks to trade with the global north. They're key means of addressing problems of managing common goods and resources. The management of water, streams, forests, air quality, for example, environmental stewardship, fishing grounds, and so on, are very often organized through cooperatives that enable users of these resources to share the resource effectively and to protect it for common use. And this is a huge issue now with the ongoing privatization and exposure of these remaining natural resources. You know, the Irish issue today, ongoing with water, is a case in point. And the same kind of efforts are being made to privatize water, for example, in Greece. And so cooperatives are one way of reorganizing these kinds of essential natural resources so that the control of them and their use and their availability remains in social and common hands. Cooperatives are a key model for reforming trade practices through the reform of governance systems. If only we can think about how organizations like the WTO and the International Monetary Fund could look to cooperative structures to distribute control rights and power to all the countries that are affected by these organizations, not just the powerful Northern European countries and the United States. There are a lot of opportunities, I think, for the cooperative movement to respond to the crisis, but also to try and remake a political economy along entirely different lines based on economics serving social and community ends primarily, and doing that through the democratization of enterprises and markets and economies using one or another form of cooperative model. Young people especially are looking for new ways of working, new ways of organizing enterprises and services, and cooperatives really beginning to reappeal to them. When we talk about cooperative economies, when we talk about social economies, most of the conversation focuses on the composition of the social economy, for example, as being cooperatives and nonprofit organizations and foundations, social enterprises, and so on. But very little thought is given to the question of what this means in terms of markets. And so I just wanted to point this out, that a social economy, in order for it to really flourish, to really function, needs to have a social market that is analogous and in a sense, provides the exchange and market structures that correspond to the principles upon which social economy organizations like cooperatives operate. So principles of mutuality, of solidarity, of reciprocity, of democratic control, and so on, are also principles that need to be embedded in a kind of market that is based also on reciprocity, solidarity, and so on. This is still an untested area, but I just wanted to sort of place this in people's minds, because a social economy without a social market that corresponds to it is one that remains a dependent economy on either charity money or public funding through government support. And if that ends, then the social economy also suffers. The essential nature of the crisis that we started our conversation with is, in fact, that economics has become antisocial, that the economic system is toxic to social cohesion, to the development and sustenance of personal well-being and of healthy communities, and that fundamentally this is a result of the absence of democracy in our economies. And the only way that the economic paradigm can actually be reformed to provide the kinds of economic models that are actually going to serve social needs and common benefits is by democratizing economies and democratizing markets in just the same way that it was only through the democratization of politics through representative democracy that we started seeing a distribution of political power that benefited the majority, as opposed to simply small and tiny privileged elite of landed gentry in the 1800s. The same is true within economies. So the humanization of the economy really is about how to make it more human, how to make it more responsive to the aspirations and needs of individuals and their families and their communities. That is only possible through the use of paradigms, enterprise models, production systems that actually democratize both the workplace and the broader economy through some form of cooperation.